Hello guys, and welcome to another episode of my lecture. On today's episode, we'll be discussing the fifth requirement of the admissibility of a confessional statement. This is very key, and this is something that you should pay very good attention to. And let's go straight to my notes. When discussing the last requirement, it says that the tests of admissibility under the New Evidence Act is whether or not the statement is reliable. That is the reliability of the confessional statement. It is important to know that under the Repealed Evidence Act, the test of admissibility of a confessional statement is the voluntariness of the confessional statement. However, the Evidence Act 2011 has introduced a new test, and that is the test of reliability as opposed to voluntariness, as we can see in the old Evidence Act of a confessional statement. This is stated by section 29 2b of the Evidence Act. Now, when we go to section 29 2b, it says that in circumstances of anything said or done which are likely in the circumstances existing at the time to render unreliable any confession. Look at it. To render unreliable any confession which might be made by him in such consequence. To render what? Unreliable. Also, when we look at the case of BABALOLA BORISHADE versus the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Hussein Mukhtar, Justice of the Court of Appeal, stated that an extrajudicial statement made by the appellant was not voluntary is not admissible. And if wrongly admitted, it has to be expunged from the record. It is only admissible when it is made by the accused voluntarily. In other words, the voluntary element in the statements is what qualifies it to be admissible. Yes, we have looked at the case of BABALOLA BORISHADE versus the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And one thing that Hussein Mukhtar, Justice of the Court of Appeal, told us is the fact that voluntariness will determine admissibility. However, our new 2011 Evidence Act of Nigeria is telling us that it is the reliability of the confessional statement that determines its admissibility. What does that mean? It tells us that under the old Evidence Act, we are more restricted to whether or not it was made voluntarily. Under the New Evidence Act, it opens the arms a little to not only being voluntary, but whether it was given under reliable circumstances. Do you understand? I will explain what reliable circumstances is under two heads. Number one, oppression. Number two, threats. Oppression and threats. Those are the two heads that we can talk about whether or not it has been given voluntarily and it has been given reliably. Those are the things I will be discussing in my subsequent set of video. Oppression and threats. But I want you to know that when we are talking about reliability, in one of the cases I will quote for you, reliability was also shown to be when you have not given the person food. You didn't give him food. He was sick. You locked him up in the cell for 1 week. And I don't understand. How exactly in those circumstances would you expect him not to sign anything that anybody puts in front of him? Just me, ordinary fasting and praying for 24 hours. The next 24 hours, I can do anything just to eat. Now imagine that you haven't given him food for close to a week. And imagine that the person that we are speaking about here is also very sick, to the extent that the person even fainted at certain points. And you still did not give him medical attention, you didn't give him food, and then you said that the confessional statement which he signed is supposed to be admissible. That might not have been under threat or under violence or under this, but even it might have been voluntarily made, because they didn't threaten him. They just said, okay, go. And then because they didn't give him food, they did not threaten him, they didn't do anything, he had to sign the confessional statement that please just let me sign. Do you understand? Now in that case, can we necessarily say that it was given voluntarily? It can be argued that it was given voluntarily, but if we are interpreting it under the New Evidence Act, it was given under unreliable circumstances, and that exactly is what sums up section 29 2b of the Evidence Act, especially when it discusses the unreliability of a confessional statement. Do you understand that? So with this, I'm going to go then to the two heads that I told you about earlier. In my next video, we'll be talking about oppression as a tool to expunge or reject the admissibility of a confessional statement. After that, we'll be talking about threat as a tool. I will see you in my next lecture.